Rabbi Nansen. So I have 5 girls. I study Zohar at midnight every night, but I want to do a true consequence. Now there's 5 more girls.
Exactly.
Now my wife and I have a mission. Unfortunately, we're in our 40s, so it's going to take longer.
Right. Where there's a will, there's a way. All right, let's get started.
My name is Scott.
Good morning, everybody. Hey, Dr. Maxie, great to see you. Good morning.
You.
Wow, Ray, good morning. Great to see you. Oh, what a treat. Mariana, great to see you. Good morning.
Hi, thank
Hey.
you.
Joy, welcome. It's great to see you. David, Dr. D, welcome. Great to see you. And Tony, welcome. Hey, Oded, good morning. All right. By the way, for our online crew, if you guys ever have a chance to come out here on a Sunday morning, we have the most incredible breakfast here. There's literally a breakfast pizza that was made. It's out of control over here. It's like a hot breakfast made from scratch. We got a whole kitchen crew over here just pumping out delicious breakfast. So everyone is always invited if you'd like to join. Oh, Yaakov, you're showing the, you're going to model the food.
Wow.
All right, on a buffet, it's all separate, so you can see what it is, but you get the idea. All right, we're gonna get started. Oh, wow, is that, look at that.
Greek yogurt
Oh, wow.
and fruit and granola.
But that was well done on the production. Yeah, it's good layering. I remember like the last time I saw that type of layering was when I was a kid and we had the sand. You know, you poured the sand into those like little glass jars and you made the art with the different layers of sand. That was always really nice.
Yes.
All right, let's get started. Oh, is somebody calling me? Oh, all right. I don't know how to stop a phone call from going on my computer, but whatever, we'll figure that out. All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. We are about ready to get started. Okay. Oop. If only we can get this noise to stop of this ringing. I think we stopped it. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Kabbalah Café. So today our topic is, thank you. Our topic is the Kabbalah of Astrology. We have a lot to cover. So I want to kind of give it just a drop of background, and then we're going to jump straight into the topic. So the background is the series that we're doing now, the series on Kabbalah that we're doing right now is called Have a Little Faith. And Have a Little Faith is all about understanding what faith is, what it isn't, why it is that, for example, the Jewish people back in the day in biblical times, why they demonstrated such fickle tendencies regarding faith. You know, they saw the miracles at the Exodus, they saw the miracles at the splitting of the sea, they saw the revelation at Sinai, and then 40 days later, they created and worshiped the golden calf. That's something that is just frankly astonishing and shocking. And so we're trying to get to the heart of what is faith and why is it so fickle sometimes, and how to sustain faith, and who has greater faith, and why is it that, and this is an angle that we're going to be dealing with, why is it that sometimes the feminine quality has more faith as opposed to masculine quality, which is a little bit more forgetful? Where does that come from? So we're going to be dealing with a lot of these topics, but amongst our conversation in our text, so we ended up with we came across an interesting idea, and that is that the ancient Egyptians were steeped in astrology. And because of that, the Jews that came out of Egypt were also somewhat susceptible to astrological tendencies and to chalking things up to the stars. Now, we started developing that notion, and we also started debunking the notion that the stars have any power, because we said that in truth, we said this last week, in truth, only Hashem, only God has the power, and the stars are like a hammer in the hand of a craftsman, or like a paintbrush in the hand of the artist. It's only a tool that is used by the divine in order to create the masterpiece of life, of creation, but it's not that the stars themselves have their own volition. So pursuant or alongside that conversation, I wanted to do a deep dive into astrology from a Jewish perspective and kind of present the different viewpoints on astrology. Because what we find when you look at classic Jewish sources, you find a little bit of a diversity of opinion on astrology. Sam, if I can ask you to pass these around. This is a sheet that I put together, a source sheet that I put together, and I'll share it with you online as well. That shares some viewpoints, various viewpoints, divergent viewpoints on astrology that I think is very important as we get into this topic. Hey, Matt, welcome. I'm glad you made it through the driving lane. Great to see you. All right, bring it in. All right, so grab one of these copies. We're going to start with this. And again, the idea today is to really focus on what is the Jewish take on astrology. Is it kosher or not? Is it legit or not? What, if any, messages can be gleaned from astrology from a Jewish perspective? And of course, I'll be sharing a Kabbalistic perspective on astrology. After all, this is a Kabbalah class, so that's what we're going to be focusing on. So the first thing we'll be doing is looking through the source sheet. Let me pull it up here. For our online crew. Give me a quick second. Okay, here we go. Kabbalah Café. Okay. All right. I'm going to start reading. This is Maimonides. So the first opinion that we're going to cover is Rambam. Maimonides. Rambam, of course, was the famous Jewish medieval physician, astronomer, philosopher, and codifier of Jewish law. Maimonides comes out very strongly against astrology. Very strongly against astrology. Take a look at what Rambam writes. This is a fascinating letter that Rambam wrote to the Jewish community in Marseille. Is that how you pronounce it? Marseille, France, in 1194. So this is an ancient letter it's an old letter that Rambam writes to the Jews of Marseille in 1194. And he writes about truth. He writes, how do you know something is real? You know, today a big buzzword is fake news. But we're not going to be dealing with that, but truth. How do you know when something is true? So look what he writes. He says, right, exactly. Truth can only come from three sources, he writes. First, rational proof, as in mathematical sciences. Secondly, the perception by one of the five senses. And thirdly, tradition from the prophets and the righteous. I want to stop here for a moment because there's a lot that was just packed into that one sentence. He says, if you want to know if something is true, it must be verifiable by one of three ways. Method number one, if you can rationally prove it, like in mathematical sciences. If you can show your formula and it checks out, then you can believe in it. Then it's truth. If you can, that's number one. Number two, if you can perceive it by one of your five senses, then it just might be true. Sound like Jeff Foxworthy. And third, if it's a tradition from our prophets and the righteous tzaddikim and neviim, right? Then you can take it as truth. That's what he says. Let's continue. It is accordingly incumbent upon every wise person, he continues to say, to investigate his doctrinal beliefs and classify them according to one of the three basic sources from which they are drawn, namely tradition, sensation, or rational insights. He says, when you believe in something, ask yourself the following questions. Does it pass the Maimonides test of truth? Okay, he didn't say that, I'm saying that. Right, but he says, ask yourself the question. Does it pass the test of one of these three categories? Is it something that is based on authentic tradition? Good morning. Is it something that is grounded in sensation? I feel it, I sense it. Or is it rational insight? One, however, let's continue, who grounds his beliefs, we're starting with that, who grounds his belief in any other but one of these guiding principles, Scripture refers to him as the simple believe every word. It says in Proverbs, a fool believes in everything. Oh, he translate here as the simple. Pesi means also a fool. Yeah, in Hebrew, is that word? Pei taf yud? Peti? Was it a fool? Fool. Peti yamin l'chol davar. A fool believes in everything. Yeah, that's the pasuk. A fool believes everything. What did Barnum say? P.T. Barnum?
The sucker born every man.
There you go. That's kind of from King Solomon, from Proverbs, right? The simple belief,
There's nothing new under the sun.
nothing, right? Also King Solomon. All right, let's continue. All of these words about the truth of astrology. So one second. So here's the context. The Jews of Marseille asked the Rambam about astrology. So here's this big conclusion. All of these words about the truth of astrology are not words of wisdom at all. They are foolish. And I possess many proofs without fault to nullify all of the assumptions of the astrologers. And they did not deal with astrology at all, and none of them wrote treatises on the subject, not one from amongst the Greek wise men. Now, Maimonides was a fan. I don't know, fan. He was well versed in Greek philosophy, Aristotle primarily. He writes extensively quoting Aristotle. And Rambam says, none of the great Greek wise men wrote about astrology. And he says to him, that means that astrology is essentially not true. Maimonides further writes now that's a letter that he wrote to a community that was asking about his position on astrology, or the Jewish position on astrology. But he also touches on astrology in his halachic works, in his works of Jewish law, which is way more definitive and much more actionable. So he wrote, Maimonides is a prolific scholar and author, but he's also primarily, but to me primarily, at least, as a halachic authority. He's the only halachic authority that organized the entire body of Jewish law in an organized and systematized fashion. Now, the Talmud tells you everything, but good luck finding it, because the Talmud is all over the place, even though the Talmud is organized by subject. But once you get into a page, as many of us around the table can attest to, once you open up a page of Talmud, all bets are off. You might start with discussion in one place and end up like a Plinko board. Remember that? The Price is Right. You drop down the little disc and it bounces along the things, right? You don't know where it's going to land at the bottom. Yeah, I love Plinko. That was my favorite. That was without doubt my favorite. But here's the point. You never know. It's not so organized. And then you had commentaries, halachic commentaries that on the Talmud, they basically said, like the Rush and the Rif, they said, okay, hold on. This is spinning a little too out of control. And there's a lot of stories that are not actionable, not halachic in nature. And there's a lot of divergent opinions, and we need to know what to do in any given situation. So they wrote commentaries. Good morning, Anthony. They wrote, and thank you for breakfast. Woo! You did, but Anthony, you are, as always, leading the charge, and we don't take you for granted. Thank you. To borrow a phrase.
The women?
Yes, and Jeff as well. Oh, good morning, Adam. Welcome. All right, this is great. Let's pass around these two handouts. So back to Maimonides, just to be clear here. So Maimonides, so one second, before we get to Maimonides. So just to give you, just to take you into the window of Rambam's accomplishments in halacha. So the Talmud has all halacha in it, but it's a little all over the place. And it's hard to sift through different opinions and to know what the halacha is. So you had commentaries, great halachic authority, like the Rif and the Rush, who what they did was they wrote a commentary on the Talmud where they basically went through the Talmudic order of topics and said, okay, this is the halacha, this is the halacha, this is the halacha, but it's still following the order of the Talmudic page, which is not, if we were designing from scratch, it wouldn't be how we would organize it. What Rambam did was he took all of the Talmud and he basically restructured it from scratch. He created 14 volumes of law. Each volume is divided into subsections and subcategories and then chapters and paragraphs, and each one is numbered, and each one is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's exquisitely formulated, defined. It's unbelievable how clear and it is. Now, he's not the only opinion, because there were contemporaries that disagreed with his conclusion, because they burnt his they burnt it because of the philosophy that he wrote. Because he writes in his intro in Mishnah Torah what I'm referring to. He says all you need to do is study the Torah, like the 5 books of Moses, and what I just wrote, and that's all you need. So
that was kind of brave.
On his tombstone, It says, Mimoshe ad Moshe lokam kemoshe. From Moses, from Moses, OG Moses to Moses, Maimonides, there was no one else like Moses.
He also had no record.
He also didn't cite his
He didn't say
sources.
where did the source.
Correct. He just wrote it. He was a guy, if you don't want to read some dense, like footnote laden stuff, academic paper, you read, it's clear. He also writes crystal clear. But again, he wasn't the only opinion in town. And some people, contemporaries like the Ravid, Avram ben David, a person who lived in his time, disagreed with hundreds of halachot, laws that he writes. He says, I disagree. Look back at the Talmud, you got it wrong. You chose the wrong opinion, or you derived the wrong opinion from whatever it is. So, but here's the deal. In Judaism, it's healthy to have machloket, dispute. It's normal. We're not always going to see eye to eye, and that's fine. The point of all this introduction is to say that when Rambam, Maimonides, writes, what he writes in his Mishnah Torah holds a lot of weight. Look what he writes. This is the second half of this first page, Maimonides on astrology. Look at the bottom two paragraphs. He says, whoever believes in these and similar things, astrology and sorcery, and thinks in his heart that they are true and scientific and only forbidden by the Torah, is nothing but a fool deficient in understanding. In other words, if you think it's real, just the Torah said not to dabble in it, you're a fool, right? Someone's going to take your money. Sensible people, however, who possess sound mental faculties, know by clear proofs that all of these practices which the Torah prohibited have no scientific basis, but are chimerical. I think that's how you pronounce it, and inane. And that only those deficient in knowledge are attracted to these follies, and for their sake leave the ways of truth. Now, I don't know, He's saying that only a fool would believe in astrology. And if the Torah prohibits it, it's not just because Torah is saying it's real, just be careful. The Torah is saying it's not real. Don't waste your money.
Doesn't the Zohar deal with?
One second. Yes, we're going to get into that, The Torah says not to, we're going to cite the Torah sources. Hold on. I'm taking on a bit of a journey here. So that's Rambam. So if you just read Rambam, if you just read Maimonides, it would seem pretty clear that astrology is not only forbidden by Torah law, but it's also
Good morning.
foolish. It's also pseudoscience.
I'm not home yet.
There's a problem with this perspective. The problem is,
No, David is
Look at other
coming
sources.
today. I'm gonna pick
right?
him
The
up.
problem is when you look at other sources, you're dealing with other takes on this that seem to imply something quite different. So let's turn the page to the second half of that first page, second side, where it says Jewish astrologers. Okay, this is from the Talmud and from the Midrash. I have two different quotes here, and this is just two of many. Take a look from the Talmud tractate Bava Batra 16b. There's a verse in Genesis 24 that says, Hashem Beirach et Avram Bakol, God blessed Abraham with everything. I highlighted or I bolded the word everything. God blessed Abraham with everything. What does it mean with everything? Rabbi Eliezer Hamadai said, Abraham possessed the gift of astrology, and great kings from the east and the west lined up at his door to seek astrological guidance. So one of two things is happening here. Either Abraham was a fraud, because we just learned that astrology is not real, right? Didn't Maimonides just say that astrology isn't real? So what are we saying? What's the Talmud saying? That Abraham was the biggest huckster, was the original con, right? Like before, what's her name? The Netflix thing? Well, no, Elizabeth Holmes.
What's her name?
Anna, whatever.
Delphi or
Delphi,
whatever.
yeah. Before her, before him, before this recent guy, the financial guy, the
Bernie Madoff.
no. Yeah, Sam Bankman-Fried. Before SBF, like, you know who else was scamming people? Abraham. Because he was the biggest astrologer, and we know that's not real, right? Because
1 second.
didn't we learn? Oh, 1 second. Didn't we learn that that's not real? We just learned in the previous page that it's not real. So if Abraham was an astrologer and great kings lined up at his door, you know what they were probably doing? Probably sharing some of their wealth. And it's not real, right? It doesn't sound like that. Sounds the Talmud seems to indicate that it is legit. Let's continue the Midrash. King Solomon's wisdom was greater than the ancient ones, and their greatest wisdom and their greatest, well, probably and the greatest wisdom of the ancient ones was in astrology. Solomon was well versed in astrology. So what we see here is the Midrash tells us, and I mentioned these last week, the Midrash says that King Solomon was well versed in astrology. So 1 second, is it real? Is it legit? And how could it be prohibited by Torah? We also know that certainly King Solomon, we wouldn't imagine, was going against a blatant prohibition in Torah to practice astrology when astrology is forbidden. And Abraham, even though Abraham lived before the Torah was given, we have it on good authority that the patriarchs and the matriarchs kept the Torah even before it was given. That's what we're told in our tradition. If that's the case, then how's Abraham an astrologer? What's going on here? Maimonides says two things. It's illegal and it's fraudulent. So what are we saying? Abraham and Solomon practiced an illegal, fraudulent practice? What are we saying? What's going on here? How can Maimonides disagree with the Talmud and the Medrash that predate him by 1,000 years? What's going on here? Now, to understand this, I want to present, I think, a novel approach. And the novel approach, I think, the more you look at the sources, the more the approach that I'm about to share with you to reconcile. Let me tell you where I'm going. Where I'm going to try to take you to a place to recognize that Rambam, Talmud, Medrash, no one's disagreeing. They're just speaking about different things. And I'll share with you what I mean. And what I'm trying to say will become clear. When you take a look at the sources, you quickly realize that there's a very interesting quirk about astrology. Take a look at the next section called Hit or Miss. This is from the Midrash, Bereshit Rabbah 85:2. I need to give you a little bit of background before we do this one. This Midrash is on the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, and it's seeking to explain a very interesting juxtaposition in Torah, which I need to back up a half a second and explain what I mean by juxtaposition. The Torah is incredibly precise. Not only is each law of Torah, special, but every word, every letter, certainly every verse, every part of Torah is precise. And not only is the meaning of the verse itself precise, but the proximity of one verse to the other is also meaningful. In other words, the location where one story and another story are told is also significant. So if you have two stories back to back, not only can each be understood independently, but there's also a way to understand why these two are placed in proximity to each other. With that in mind, let me tell you two stories that are in proximity to each other. In the story of Joseph, right? Remember the Technicolor Dreamcoat. So Joseph is sold. His brothers are jealous. They sell him as a slave. He ends up in Egypt. But in the middle of the Joseph drama, there's one other story that interrupts the narrative. The Joseph story is the longest, I would say the longest unbroken narrative, but I guess it depends what you consider a narrative, because you call the Exodus and the aftermath one narrative. But I mean, like, as far as like one character, one story, the Joseph story is the longest, plays out over like 3 or 4 or 5 Torah portions. It's a very long story. But there's one story that's right in the middle of that. And it's the story of Yehuda and Tamar, Judah and Tamar. And this is shortly after the brothers band together and Judah, and they throw him into a pit and they want to kill him. And then Judah says, why should we kill him? What are we going to gain from killing him? Let's sell him, at least we'll get some money. That's what he says. They sell him. Immediately after they sell him, the Torah tells us about Judah. What happens to Yehuda, Judah, the brother who gave the advice to sell. And they say he got married. He had 3 kids. His wife died. And he went into, not farming, cattle rearing, cattle raising, raised animals. He was on the farm. His oldest son gets married to a woman named Tamar. Oldest son, his name was He got married to Tamar, this young woman. Tamar, and he dies, childless, as was ancient tradition and Jewish law. So she marries the brother, the next one down, Onan. Well, he also died. Interesting commentaries as to why they died, but that's not for now. So now this woman, so this Tamar, this woman, she married two brothers. They both died, young, childless. And she says to Yehuda, to her father-in-law, you got one more son, right? I'm ready to marry him too. So he says, whoa, slow down. I don't know about that. Your what's it called again? Your track record is a little dubious. I don't know that he was blaming her, but it is what it is. And he was well, hold on, we're gonna get hold on. So he says he's not ready yet. The youngest son, he's not ready to get married yet. And he pushed her off. Now, she's not getting married to anyone else because she's waiting, because she's told. She realizes at some point that that it's not happening, that she's not going to marry Shelah. It's the youngest son. So she takes matter into her own hands. The Torah tells us that she dresses up in the clothes of a harlot, and she stands at the crossroads and waits until Judah comes by, because she knew where he was traveling, I guess, or walking to and from work. And he propositions her, and she says yes. She says, on condition though that you give me. Oh, he says, I don't have any payment, I don't have any money on me, I don't have any cash. So she says, okay, I'll take what you got as collateral. So he gives her his walking stick, his ring, and something else.
An amulet.
And maybe an amulet. He gives her a few things, and that's it. And they do their business, and he goes away. Later on, he tells one of his assistants, go back to that corner and that area and find her and give her the cash and get back my stuff. Can't find her. The assistant can't find anyone there. They ask around, was there a woman around that works over in this area? No. Comes home to Judah and says, Judah, I'm sorry. No one knows who she is. No, we can't find her. I can't find her. He says, all right, it's all fine. It is what it is. Okay, so I don't have my stuff, but the experience happened. And a few months later, the word gets to Judah that his daughter-in-law, Tamar, who was married to two of his, that's theoretically waiting for his third son, that she's pregnant. Give out. She's now pregnant. Oh, she was unfaithful. Well, no. He says, mazalota.
Was she with her shver?
So yes. Yeah. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
So he says, that's it. Capital offense. She should be killed. Why? Because it's a little bit of a disturbing story, but nonetheless, it's because she was engaged or had been married, whatever, was waiting to be married, etc. Daughter-in-law, she was a priestess, she was daughter of a priest, she was the daughter of whatever it was, his daughter of shame or something, it was a priest, whatever. So he says, that's it, capital punishment. So they take her, they arrest her, huh? Yeah. Yeah, they find her. And they basically say to her, no, that's it. They arrest her, whatever it is. And she says, I will submit to whatever punishment you wish, but just know I'm pregnant from the one to whom these items belong. They go to Judah. They tell, here's the message. And Judah says, I'm wrong. She's right. She's more righteous than me. And then it says the very interesting line in the Torah. It says, that, well, I forget the Hebrew, but the English Rashi says could be translated as two ways. Either he never saw her again, or he never stopped seeing her again. One of those, I know there's one or the other, but basically anyway, so that was that. And then she was pregnant with twins, and it was Peretz and Zarach. Those are the two children. She was pregnant with twins. She had twins, and one of them is the ancestor of King David and the Davidic dynasty and ultimately Mashiach, etc. Okay, so that's one story. And then right after that, you have another story. Joseph in Egypt. Remember what happened with Joseph? And he was really great at his job in Potiphar's house. That was the guy who he worked for. And Potiphar entrusted him with everything. But then Potiphar's wife, she liked him. And so she arranged that everybody should be away from the house. and it'll be only them. And then she really came on very strongly, and she was grabbing, and he was almost ready to relent to her her advances. Till the last second, he ran away, and she was still holding on to his garment, etc. And that was the story. So the Midrash says that there's a juxtaposition. Sorry, there is. These two stories are back to back. The Midrash says that there's a connection, a conceptual connection between these two stories. Take a look as I share my screen once again, and you have it in front of you here. Take a look at what the Midrash says. Rabbi Samuel ben Nachman, Shmuel, the son of Nachman, said, in order to bring the stories of Tamar and Potiphar's wife into proximity, thus teaching that as the former was actuated by a pure motive, so was the latter. I just want to break down that line. What Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman is saying is just like Tamar clearly acted for the right reasons. In other words, she knew that she was supposed to have children from Yehuda, and he wasn't fulfilling his end of the deal by giving him the third son, and that was supposed to happen. And so she took matters into her own hands. So by juxtaposing the story of Potiphar's wife, it tells us that she also acted with a pure motive. Let's continue inside. For Rabbi Joshua ben Levi, Rishu ben Levi said, she, Potiphar's wife, saw by her astrological arts that she was to produce a child by him, Joseph, but she did not know whether it was to be from her or from her daughter. It's crazy what the Midrash says, that she saw, based on astrology, that she was destined to have children through Joseph. But she didn't know that it was actually her daughter. Guess who Joseph ended up marrying? Her daughter. Asnat bat Potiphar. His wife was Asnat, who was the daughter of Potiphar's wife, who framed him for a crime he didn't commit and had him thrown in dungeon for 20 years. I don't know, multiple years. I think upwards of. What's the point?
He's writing this, he knows.
Right. Yeah. But the point is that why did she come on so strongly? She was not just stripped. You read the story and it's like, all right, well, she liked him. But according to the Midrash, there's something else going on. She saw, based on astrology, that there was a familial, a destiny connection between her and Joseph. You know what else is the upshot? What happens when you look into the stars? What's the implication of this? Hit or miss. She thought it was her daughter. In other words, she saw something. Let's look at another example. This is coming up, Passover. Exodus 1. This is something, by the way, that I imagine that most of us, when we read this story of the slavery in Egypt, we gloss over and we don't notice, we don't pay attention to the nuance. I want to bring out a very important nuance over here that the commentaries point out. Take a look at the last two excerpts on that page, Exodus 1, verse 15-16, and Exodus 1:22. Now the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one who was named Shifra and the second who was named Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women and you see on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall put him to death, but if it is a daughter, she may live. This is the classic decree of infanticide, right, against the Jewish boys, where Pharaoh sends out a message to the Jewish midwives. If there's a Jewish, when the Hebrew women are giving birth, if it's a boy, take the boys out. You can leave the daughters. You can leave the girls. Okay. A few verses later, the Torah tells us something else. Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the Nile, and every daughter you shall allow to live. When you read it quickly, it seems like the same thing. But if you slow it down, which we're doing right now, and you read it carefully, you notice that there are several very important differences between these two seemingly similar decrees. What's difference number one?
Kill them immediately.
What else?
The audience.
The audience?
Midwives versus all the people.
Good. In the first decree, or in the first instance, the first statement of the decree, Pharaoh is speaking to the Hebrew midwives. In his second decree, he is commanding all the people, which implies all his people. All his people. Okay? And then what other difference is there? None of the audience of who he's telling to. What about the decree itself?
Putting to death versus casting into the Nile.
But good, either killing or casting into the Nile. Good. What else?
Well, it said every son who was born, so it seems like while they're being born, they're being killed here, and then they're allowed to live.
If you isolate the second verse, the second paragraph, verse, Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the Nile. Isn't that what it says?
So,
If he's telling all his people, and he's saying,
His guys were telling him, we don't know where he's gonna come from.
1 second. Good. Hold on. That's gonna be the solution. But let's understand what's going on over here. The first decree is told to the Hebrew midwives about the Hebrew children. The second decree is told to everybody about every boy that's born. What happened? So the commentators tell us the first decree was straight up ending the Jewish population. And that was the ongoing decree. Jewish boys should be killed. The second decree was 1 day only. Because on that day, Pharaoh received a message from his astrologers. And they said, we see in the stars that the Redeemer of the Jews is going to be born today or on such and such day. And we have a blurred vision about whether or not he is going to be in a Jewish home or a non-Jew or an Egyptian home. You know why? Where was Moses raised? There you go. We don't see clearly that he's being raised in a Jewish home with a Jewish family, but we also see that his downfall will come through water. And thus we find on that day, Pharaoh tells all his people, including his own people, the Egyptians, every boy that's born on this day should be killed. How? In the Nile River. Let's take a look at the next page. And this is all from the Talmud tractate Sota 12b. Pharaoh's decree of throwing Jewish boys into the Nile River, and although he says Jewish boys into the Nile River, it's really all the boys that day, was based on his astrologers seeing that the downfall of the Redeemer of Israel would have his downfall through water. So in truth, his downfall came through the waters of strife. Remember when Moses hit the rock?
That's the water they were talking about.
His downfall of not going into Israel, etc., was going to happen when he hit the rock to produce the water instead of speaking to the rock. Listen to how the Talmud concludes. They foresee, but they do not know what they foresee. They mutter, but know not what they mutter. You know what that means? The astrologers, all the great experts astrologers, they see, they don't really know what they see. And they mutter, they don't really know what they mutter. What does this tell us? To me, this explains everything about astrology. Are there messages in the stars? Absolutely. 100%. And I'll explain this according to Kabbalah, why this is so. Are there messages in the stars? 100% absolutely. But can you effectively pull out and interpret correctly those signs in the stars? Likely not. When Maimonides says that astrology is foolish, is a pseudo, is not real, when Maimonides says that this is not legit, you know what he's referring to? How astrology is practiced. When someone says, come, I'll tell you what it means. Thank you very much. What science are you basing that on? Are there messages in the stars? You can't go against Chazal, our statements, the statements of our sages. Abraham was an astrologer. Solomon was an astrologer. Maimonides didn't know that? Of course he knew that. What Maimonides is saying is the practice of astrology. Call 1-800 astrology, right? The practice of astrology, he says, is not true, is illegitimate. Because the practice involves human beings reading, interpreting, and expressing. And that, he says, you can't get right.
So are we saying the only ones that could get that right was Abraham and King Solomon?
We have instances, that's a good question. What we have here are instances where our sages tell us that they were practicing astrology. The implication is that they weren't doing so in a fraudulent fashion. So I don't know if I would say it as directly as what you're saying, but I don't know that I can disagree with that either. What it seems to be saying is that the guys who knew what they were doing knew what they were doing. But when the Jews of Marseille also may be accompanied by prophecy. We'll see soon where God even corrects Abraham and astrology, which is very interesting. But we'll see. That's why I'm hesitant to say definitively. The Talmud and Tractate Shabbat deals with this as well. But just to rewind a half a second, so what we see here is when the Jews of Marseille in France are in 1194 asking Maimonides, what's the Jewish position on astrology? He's telling them, don't believe it. And that makes sense because whichever astrologers are going around and saying, oh, we know how to do this, he's saying, prove it or go home. And you can't prove it. It's not a science. There's no exact formula here. So then it's not legit. And the Torah cautions against it. Now, I'm going to explain how Abraham practiced it. If the Torah cautioned against it, we'll talk about that in a moment. But the first question on the table is it legit? And the answer is yes, but no. In other words, when you ask, is astrology legit? The answer is yes. Legitimately, the stars contain messages, but no, in that most likely the person that is presenting themselves as an expert. I mean, who am I to say no? But Maimonides already did it, so I can rely on him. Who says that person is really qualified, and what is their qualification, and what are they basing it on, etc. Now, I'm going to share with you the astrological sign of Kabbalah, and that we'll see is a bit of a different angle. But the idea here is that there's a yes, but no. Yes, there are messages in the stars, but no, most likely, it's not going to be read correctly by just any Shmerel Yankel who's just trying to play astrology. Now, that being said, let's look at the halachic issues, because Maimonides also alluded to those when he said that it's forbidden by Torah. So what's going on here, and is this even completely forbidden to dabble in altogether? So for this, we continue in the handout. I try to put together a pretty comprehensive outline on handout outline on this so that you can kind of follow the process of this journey. Now, we have in the Torah multiple instances where the Torah prohibits us from trying to divine or foretell or otherwise conjure up the future. Take a look at the first quote under future prohibitions. This is a verse from Leviticus chapter 19. The Torah says, you shall not act on the basis of omens or lucky hours. It doesn't prohibit lucky charms. So,
Should.
yeah. Huh?
That should, because it's got gelatin in them.
Oh, well, there you go. I haven't looked at the box in a while, but I remember the commercials. Those are always funny. You shall not act on the basis of omens or lucky hours. So it seems like, again, the Torah is prohibiting these types of consulting the magical or the occult. Take a look at the next quote from Deuteronomy, which is a longer quote. When you have come to the land the Lord your God is giving you, which is, of course, Israel, you shall not learn to do like the abominations of those nations. So here we have a commandment basically saying, don't pick up the practices of the people that will be your neighbors. There shall not be found among you, amongst other things, a soothsayer, a diviner of auspicious times, one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, a pithom sorcerer, a yedoah sorcerer, or a necromancer. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And the Torah concludes that little conversation by saying, Tamim tihya im Hashem Elokecha, be wholehearted, tamim, or sincere, or pure, or simple-hearted. Tamim can be translated multiple ways, but be wholehearted with the Lord your God. Now, this becomes the source of the prohibition against consulting all sorts of tools that will predict the future or tell you what's going on. Essentially, the Torah is saying, be wholehearted with the Lord your God, meaning trust in Hashem, and that's all you need, right? Like the famous song, all you need is God. right? Oh, you have a different version. I'm so sorry. If you play it backwards, it's not satanic. It says certain speed on the record player. That was the Beatles, right? All you need is love. Yeah, I think I have that record. Anyway, so the point is that that-
They love backwards for people.
oh, you're right. All right. Well, yeah, evolve. Oy.
And Hannah
Oh.
spelled backwards is. What? Hannah spelled backwards is. Hannah.
There you go, with the H at the end. All right. So here's the deal. The Torah clearly seems to tell us that all sorts of future telling and fortune telling, etc., are prohibited. Okay. Seems like that's that. Shut the door on tarot card reading and palm reading and fortune telling and horoscopes and zodiac consultation. It seems like it's shutting the door on all of this.
God's not, he's not saying it. He's saying, don't do this.
Hmm.
It may or may not have something.
Oh, good, good. He doesn't say that's
But
not
it
true.
does- But he just says, you don't do this.
Right,
So, because the odds are you're gonna be wrong anyway.
right.
You have no way to know it's right or wrong.
But that was always my understanding. It's real. We're not allowed to do it. The reason we're not allowed to do it is because we should have faith.
That, oh,
And therefore it's a sin for us a Jew not to have faith and to look around. So that's what we're going to believe that things are going to turn out the way they're meant to turn out and have that faith in God. And that's why it's a sin.
excellent, excellent, perfectly stated. That's the way that I was going to frame it. I'm going to repeat it again for our online crew. So basically what Scott is saying is like this, and Sam is saying this as well. The Torah is not saying don't do these practices because they're not legit. The Torah is saying don't do it. Why? Be sincere and wholehearted with Hashem. In other words, put your lot, cast your lot, as it were, with God and not with these other forces. Based on Kabbalah, though, this takes on a much greater depth. And let me explain. We started saying this last week, but here's where it really comes into sharp focus. We said last week that the realm of the stars, I think we said this last week, are the last of the realm. When the spiritual energy is flowing downward from the source to us, one of the last stops, or the very last stop, before it gets delivered to us, everything, all spiritual influence, the very last stop before it comes down to us is the realm of the kochavim umazalot, stars and constellations, the realm of the zodiac. Kabbalah speaks extensively about this, which means that if you were able to look up at the stars effectively, you could see what is coming down. I think last week I gave the example of a baseball pitcher. I don't know if I did. I meant to. If I didn't, if you could see the pitch, you know what's coming your way. If you see the rotation of the ball, you know what kind of pitch it is, right? If you could look up at the stars, you could see, and we have these great planets right here as a diorama, right? If you could look and effectively interpret that, you could see what's coming your way, which is what the Egyptian astrologers did. They looked up and they said, today, Moshiach Shel Yisrael will be Nolad. Today, the Redeemer of the Jews will be born. The Talmud says, but they didn't know exactly what they were seeing. They saw more or less, generally, but they didn't see exactly with precision exactly what's going to go, what's going to happen. Thus, they got some details wrong. Although they got it right, Moses was born that day, and his downfall would be by water. But they interpreted incorrectly. In other words, the information, the gaps that they filled in was incorrect. But here's the big idea: why is it prohibited? It's prohibited not just because who says you're going to get the interpretation right. It's prohibited because of what Scott mentioned, which is, why are you looking at the stars in the first place? If it's telling you something good, anyway, you have to work for it. You can't just rest on your laurels. Oh, I see wealth coming my way. I don't do anything. You still have to work for it. And if something negative is coming your way, you can still avert it with prayer and correction, which means it's a futile exercise to look at the stars, because no matter what you see, you can still override it by going to the source. Because no matter what is coming through the stars, it's being generated by Hashem, by the source. So if you don't like the script, don't Don't complain to the script runner. Go to the writers in the writer room. Go to the director. Go to the producer. Don't go to the person that handed you the script. Go to the source to get it amended. So Torah says, don't waste your time with that. Don't follow the ways of those nations that lived in the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, prior to the Jewish arrival. Don't live like them, where all day they're looking at, oh, what does my future hold? What does my future hold? Make your future. Pray to Hashem for a good future. Take action into your hands. Daven, do a mitzvah, be a mensch, and turn to God for what you need. Look at the stars. It's a waste of time. If it's good, you still have to work. If it's bad, you can change it. So what are you doing with the stars? What are you going to gain by looking at the stars? You're going to gain a false sense of control. That's what we want. We want control. When life spins out of control, we want to hold on to something. But you know what? We know that's not authentic anyway, because we're not in control. If you want to really hold on to what's in control, hold on to Hashem, not the stars. And this is what Hashem tells Abraham, the great astrologer, who knew how to interpret the stars and who got it right. And Hashem said, still, you're wasting your time. This is an unbelievable section of Talmud. I actually quoted way more than I originally intended to. When I say quoted, I dropped on the sheet way more text than I originally intended, because I want you to see exactly the way the Talmud describes it. It's absolutely brilliant. Take a look at the handout once more, if you will, where it says changing destiny. Again, I hope what I'm saying makes sense, right? The stars have messages. That is true. People misinterpret it. That is true. Maimonides says the whole thing is ridiculous. That's true. The way it's interpreted is true. Abraham was an astrologer. Solomon was an astrologer. That's also true. It's against halacha. That's also true. But they have messages, and that's also true. All of the above is true. Yeah.
You look at this a different way. The stars don't have messages. So God knows everything. What will be, he knows the future. But we don't know the future. If we have free will, okay, we can change it. So now there is some future. So they're looking at the stars. What they're really trying to do is understand what the future is, because God already knows the future, but you can't know that. So it's futile to look at that. And maybe the stars and out there are just representative of them trying to, using that as a way to predict what the future is,
Right.
based on what God
Yeah.
knows. But it's not really that even Hashem, it's not some message he wrote in the stars necessarily. They're using this as a way to predict the future, because the future must be coming from somewhere.
Right. They're looking at where it's flowing from. But yeah, good. And Scott, you wanted to say
Yeah, I'm
something?
gonna say, it's not just the way it's done, it's sick. I mean, we're.
Correct.
Yeah, it's sick.
Correct.
Because it's the black faith.
Right. Because it's basically saying to Hashem, I don't need you. I got this. I got this. I'm going to hitch my
It's
wagon
God
to the stars.
knows the future, those stars are.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
I actually-
I'm just being a little, I'm being nice. But yeah, so we don't do it means, yeah, we don't do it.
So the stars don't have, it's not individualized messages, because if we see the future and we like, oh, then we go to God and listen to the Torah and we change our future, the stars don't change. So it's more of a general message. If you were born in May, you're going to be a stubborn person. Well, maybe I could be a loyal person, or maybe I could be better. So it's generic information. It's not individualized anyway.
I want to just point your attention to the last, let's skip the long excerpt. We're going to get back there in a second, but let's look quickly at the last paragraph on the back page, on the last page. You see that the Talmud Ibid, it's just one paragraph, but it's what you just said. One who was born under the influence of Mars will be one who spills blood, because it's red blood. Rav Ashi said he will either be a bloodletter or a thief or a slaughter of animals or a circumciser. Rabbah said, I was born under the influence of Mars and I do not perform any of these activities. Abaye said to him, who was a colleague, he was his teacher. Abaye said, my master also punishes and kills as a judge. So you are dabbling in red.
That's where you're trying to justify.
No, but yeah, I agree with you. But to Yaakov's point, what it means is there's a general influence, but how you express that, you could not you, but one could either be violent or, as you said, it could either be stubborn or loyal. I'm kashe oref. right? A stiff-necked nation is either a bad thing, obstinate, or loyal, or good. Even with the Holocaust, we're still here. God can't, we're not listening to no. Sorry, God, we're still here. You can't get rid of us so fast, right? So you're right. It is a little bit more generalized. Good. Do you want to say, Adam, you wanted to?
But you respect the fact that, like you said, it's the last level that was designed simply got it, and you accept the fact that it is through and from God, and respect it in that way that it would be.
If you see it as a tool that's coming down, like, oh, interesting. The question is, though, how much time to spend there, as opposed to looking at the source and connecting with the source of the blessing. It's kind of like we gave the example last week, like when an artist paints a masterpiece, how much time do we spend analyzing the brush afterwards? Like, oh, wow, that was a really good brush. Look at that masterpiece. Versus, even though the painting is actually being facilitated by the brush, just like the influence in this world is being facilitated by the stars, by the zodiac, but that's just the way that the master painter is doing it. So, when we say the word sin, is it evil? I don't know if it's evil, but sin could also be a waste of time, right? Sin could kind of be like, you're just wasting your time. It's not really going to be that effective. One of the reasons for this, here's what I want to do. I want to read this excerpt from the Talmud, and then I want to get to the astrological chart and hopefully share with you the Kabbalah of the zodiac. All right, so changing destiny. Take a look at what the Talmud says. Rav said, from where is it derived that there is no constellation for the Jewish people? What that means is, no constellation for the Jewish people. Of course there is, but it means that we're not subject to, that's not the final authority for us, right? Like a Hebrew national, we answer to a higher authority, right? So how do we know this? So the Talmud rhetorically answers the following. As it is stated with regard to Abraham, and he brought him outside. God brought Abraham outside, Genesis 15:5. So the Talmud gives a background. Abraham said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, behold, you have given me no offspring, and one born in my house will be my heir. That's Abraham was saying, I have no child, I have no children, and so my servant Eliezer, he's going to be the one to carry on the Abrahamic legacy. That doesn't seem right. So the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, no, this man shall not be your heir, rather one that will come forth from your own innards shall be your heir. You will have children, God tells him. Dialogue continues. Abraham said before him, Master of the universe, I looked at my astrological map, and according to the configuration of my constellations, I am not fit to have a son. Abraham says, I looked in the astrological signs, and I can't have children. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, emerge from your astrology. Right? As the verse states, and he brought him outside, as there's no constellation for Israel. But let's continue inside. What is your next page? What is your thinking? God says to Abraham. Is it because Jupiter is situated in the west that you cannot have children? I don't know what Jupiter in the west has to do with not having children, but apparently that's what Abraham thought. And God says, is that why you're thinking this?
This is all from the Gemara.
Yeah, exactly. It's all Talmudic. I will restore it and establish it in the east. God says, if that's the problem, the stars are in the wrong place. No problem. I'm going to switch it. What's the point? You know what the point of this is? Who has the final say? That's the point. And that is the meaning of that which is written with regard to Abraham, who has raised up one from the east. He will call justice, tzedek, to his steps, lo raglo. He gives nations before him and makes him rule over kings. His sword makes them as his dust, his bow as the driven stubble. Isaiah, God established Jupiter, tzedek in the east on behalf of Laraglo, Abraham. Okay, how that's derived from the verses in Isaiah, we'll leave for a deeper analysis some other time, or you can look it up in the Talmud yourself. The point of this is that the Talmud relates the story, and it's an insight. Abraham says, I looked at the stars, I can't have, it's not possible, right? Based on the influence on the energy that's coming down, I can't have children. God says, oh, that's the problem. There's an app for that. I'll just switch it. In other words, don't Ein Mazal Yisrael means we're not limited to Mazal. We're not limited to the zodiac. And the Talmud continues and gives a bunch of more stories. This is a famous story that happened with Rabbi Akiva's daughter. The Talmud continues, and from that which transpired to Rabbi Akiva as well, it can be derived that there is no consolation for the Jewish people. It doesn't mean that there's no, I keep on saying this, it doesn't mean that there's no consolation. It means that the consolation is not the final word. You can appeal or when you connect to a higher power, then you just override the constellation. So as Rabbi Akiva had a daughter, and Chaldean astrologers told him that on the same day that she enters the wedding canopy, a snake will bite her and she will die. So that was a prophecy. He was told, based on these astrologers, that his daughter would die on the day of her wedding. Okay? On that day, her wedding day, she took the ornamental pin from her hair and stuck it into a hole in the wall for safekeeping. And it happened that it entered directly into the eye of the snake. Right? The story goes, she got married. She comes back to the house with her husband, and she's undoing her hair. You know, the pins in the hair, whatever it is. So one of the pins she takes and sticks it into the wall behind her. And the lights were dim or whatever it is, and she didn't realize this. She had pierced the eye of the snake that had been destined to bite her. In the morning, when she took the pin, the snake was pulled and came out with it. Oh, there's a snake. She didn't know the prophecy. Her father knew the prophecy. Her father, Rabbi Akiva, said to her in the morning, "Oh, you're still alive." Oh, that's my paraphrase. Her father, Rabbi Akiva, said to her, "What did you do to merit being saved from the snake?" That's kind of what he was saying. Like, how are you still here? She told him in the evening, a poor person came and knocked on the door, and everyone was preoccupied with the feast and nobody heard him. This was the wedding feast. At the wedding, a poor person came in and everyone was eating and drinking and making merry, and no one noticed the poor person. I stood and took the portion that you had given me and gave it to him. Imagine at a wedding, the bride, the kala, at the head table, takes her plate of food and brings it to the back of the hall. They didn't have halls, they had houses. Back of the hall, and gives it to a poor person that walks in. Yeah. Rabbi Akiva said to her, "You performed a mitzvah and you were saved in its merit." Rabbi Akiva went out on top based on this incident that even though it was written in charity will save from death, it does not mean that it will save a person only from an unusual death, but even from death itself. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Tzedakah, charity, saves from death. It doesn't only mean from mita mishuna, an unusual or painful death. It means literally it saves from death. She was destined to die, and she altered destiny based on a mitzvah. Sorry? She gave her food at the wedding, her meal, her dinner, she gave it to a poor person that had walked into the wedding hall. No, she had given away her food to somebody in need, somebody that was hungry, and that itself was a tremendous mitzvah. That was a mitzvah of charity, a charitable gift, giving someone who needs food, and that saved her life. And so again, what's the point? I mean, the point is, if you looked into the stars, if one looked into the stars and saw that an impending death was coming, that would be frightening. The point here is, but it doesn't have to happen. We can avert it. So then what's the point? To get ourselves nervous? Or to know that we have to do a mitzvah? We know that anyway. What do you need the stars for? Here's the question. What do you need the stars for? To frighten you? To excite you? You still have to do the right thing. Still do the mitzvah. Still believe in God. Right? Still make a vessel and go to work and be smart. You still have to do the same things. So what's the point? And if there's no point, it's a distraction. And a distraction is basically a sin. Distraction from the truth is essentially a sin. So with all this being said, you would say to yourself, you think to yourself, so then there's no space for astrology. And this is where we say, well, there is. Nonetheless, astrology, according to Kabbalah, is not about, I'm going to pass these around quickly. Let's see if we can do this in about 5 minutes. This is tremendous. Astrology, according to Kabbalah, is not about future telling or prediction, because again, we don't dabble in future telling and prediction. Astrology in Kabbalah is simply about understanding that when we were born, well, one of the areas of astrology in Kabbalah is understanding that when we were born has an influence on us, not about the future, but has an influence on who we are, and thus speaks to our strengths and our weaknesses, and what we should focus on as we go through our avodah, our service in life. In other words, unlike astrology that may be typically used as a crutch or as an excuse to not work, Kabbalistic astrology is used as a catalyst to say what to work on. This is what we should work on. It's completely different. One is a way out. One is like, oh, you're going to meet the man of your dreams. Great. I'm set. Versus, here's what you need to work on. I hope that distinction, I know I'm saying this quickly, but I hope that distinction is coming out. Passes around. Please.
The story of Rabbi Akiva. Is that the source why you have like 4 people come in?
Absolutely. Always. In 7-7 in Crown Heights. you post the invitation in the synagogue.
But does that come from this?
I believe so. That you always have food, there's always food in the hall for whoever wants to come in and eat. I think it's from this, absolutely. Okay, now let's go through this quickly. The reason why I say quickly is just because of time, but this really could be a much longer experience. But the Baruch Hashem, I think we're going to be able to get through this at a fairly quick pace and walk away with some insight. Well, no, because the English months will always vary. So that's why. So according to Kabbalah, this is based on Sefer Yetzirah and other Kabbalistic sources. According to Kabbalah, every Jewish month is associated with an astrological sign, associated with a Hebrew letter, one of the 12 tribes, and a specific attribute to correct. So, for example, the month of Nisan, we're going to start from the top. Nisan, which is this month, today is the 4th day of Nisan. So it's a great place to start. So Nisan, the sign is an Aries, which is the lamb, and that makes sense because on Passover, what was the offering? A paschal lamb. There you go, lines up. By the way, these signs are the signs that everyone, it's aligned with the time of year. In other words, the Jewish astrological signs don't have different times of year. This is literally the sign that's going on right now is Aries, which is the lamb, which is again associated with Passover, and the letter Hey, which is the just like the Exodus is the birth of the people. So Hey is the birth of sound, the breath sound, the exhale is the Hey, connected with speech, correcting speech, which is Yehuda, means a leader. Yehuda was the leader of the tribes. To be a leader means you know how to communicate. And of course, Passover is all about communication, right? What's the Seder all about? V'higad to Levincha, it's about telling the story to your family, to your children, to right? It's all about expressing. The Seder, the Haggadah literally means to tell. It's all about speaking. Are we going too fast? It's fine, right? This is based on Sefer Yetzirah, which is one of the earliest Kabbalistic works. I put this together. ER.
You didn't have a problem with speech?
No. It's not necessarily a problem with. It's about what to focus on. It's about every month. It's like, what area am I going to focus on this month?
Oh, for all of us.
So if you're born under that sign, then Kabbalah would say either you're gifted in that area or you need to work on that area. But either way, everyone or both, and then everyone, as we go through the calendar year, this is something to work on. And we literally gather our families around the table and we speak and we communicate. No other holiday has embedded in the holiday the ritual of storytelling, as is Passover. Now, ER is the next month. Taurus, Bull, Vav, Yisachar, Thought. So ER is the month between Nisan and Sivan. It's the month in which we're getting ready to receive the Torah. And getting ready to receive the Torah, we have to be steadfast, we have to be strong like a bull. Vav is an upright letter, right? No zigzags at all. It's an upright letter. And it's thought because it's about getting our minds ready to receive the Torah and to be in that mind space. Yisachar were the scholars, the Torah scholars. It's all about getting ready for Torah. Sivan is the month that the Torah was given. And interestingly enough, it's connected to Gemini twins because the purpose of study is to lead to action. So Torah is really not just intellectual, it's also action-oriented. Hence the twins of Sivan, it's about learning and study, right? It's about Talmud and Maisa. It's about study and action. That's the Gemini. Zion, Clay Zion means weaponry, right? Weapons. Zion means weapons. What's our weapon in the world? Of course, Torah, not a negative weapon, but in a positive way. What's our tool in order to implement change in the world? It's Torah. Zvulun, they were the workers. They were the seafaring merchants. It's about correct movement, i.e. it's about going out into the world, not just Torah as a theory, but implementing Torah in action. That's the twins. Zvulun, the sea merchants that made their money, but in a Torah, a consistent fashion. Movement means not just understanding Torah, but moving, marching to the beat of Torah in our lives. That's Sivan. Tammuz is the summer, when the heat comes out, so more temptations arise, specifically in the realm of sight. So the attribute to think about, to work on is sight, making sure that we're only looking at what we need to look at. It's connected with Cancer crab. The crab is a scuttling creature. It looks around and it shrinks back, it scuttles back. The idea is when we shouldn't be looking at things, we shouldn't be looking at things, etc. Related to the word chet, which means fear, like the crab, which is like a little bit skittish. Ruvain is also related to the word sight. Ruvain means sight. All right, Av. That's the month that the Yeah,
I don't get the site.
the site is connected to this idea of retreating. Leads you down the wrong path, and especially again in the summer, there's more visual stimulation, etc. The idea here is that there is a retreating that is healthy to make sure that we're not going down the wrong path. It says in the Shema, "V'lo sasurach elavavchem v'achenechem," we shouldn't follow our hearts and our eyes. The idea is that, as the Talmud says, the eyes see, the heart desires, and then we act in a negative way. So that's the idea. Of the next month is the month in which the temples were, both temples were destroyed, the 9th of Av. It's because we didn't listen to Hashem. We have to focus on hearing, which is Shimon, Shmi'ah, hearing. Leo, the lion, the nations, the Babylonians and the Romans were compared to lions. Tet is quicksand, which is, is that how you say quicksand in Hebrew? That's what it says. No? Tet, all right. It says, at least what I saw is that it's translated as, it also means quicksand, which is the idea of quickly sinking into a low place. You know, when we're not following we're not listening correctly, it's easy to sink down into a low place. All right, Elul, Virgo, that's the idea of cleansing oneself, of renewal. It seems like as we go through the year, perhaps we've done things that we cannot atone, we cannot cleanse from. There's no going back. Nonetheless, our tradition tells us there's always the possibility to renew oneself, and that is the idea of a Virgo, which is connected with action. It's about correcting ourselves, not just wanting to correct, but actually correcting our actions. In the month of Elul, God were the archers of the Jewish people, and the idea of archery is that you could stand in one place and reach somewhere else. In Elul, we can fix what we've done the whole year. We could stand in 1 month and fix the previous year and the future as well. That's the power of the archery, and it's related to the letter Yud, Yad, hand. It's about action, doing. Tishrei, of course, that's obvious. Libra, scales. Tishrei is the month of judgment. It's a month of emotion, feeling. There's no other month in the Jewish calendar that has so filled with emotions, awe and simcha and joy. It's a month filled with emotions related to Ephraim. Lamed is lev, which is heart, again, emotions, and Ephraim is the idea of being fruitful. The idea is that the blessings that we get on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, those the fruits of those are bared throughout the year. That's Ephraim. All right. Next, Cheshvan is the month after Tishrei. It's the only month in the Jewish calendar that has no special days, no holidays at all. So after the big party or the big celebration, the big feeling of Tishrei comes a quiet month. The idea of the quiet month is, well, now it's time to really put into practice what we've been excited about. It's easy to be excited during the honeymoon, but the question is when the band stops, or at the wedding, but when the band stops and the lights close out, then are we still committed? So Cheshvan is about, even when it's getting cold, right? Literally in this, and as the fall kicks in, winter knocks on the door, it's about still maintaining our relationship. So that's Scorpio, which has a cold venom. So it's a venom that could be cold. It's about making sure that we don't get too cold. Related to Menashe, which is like Neshima, which is breath. Breath, which is related to smell. Breath, not with the mouth, but with the nose. Smell, Neshama, it's also related to soul. Smell, scent is the holiest of the senses, and it's the one we most take for granted. We don't think about smell as being a very powerful sense, but it's the most spiritual of the senses. None, I'm forgetting the connection already, but you'll forgive me. So the idea here is that even when you can't see anything major, like also with smell, but there's a lot of power in that quiet space to connect with Hashem. Right, reich nichoch, right, a pleasant odor.
It's like, you got any parties? None.
Okay. There's something that nun is 50. Neshama, but also nun is 50. The idea is we can either go up to the 50th level of height or the 50 levels of impurity, depending on how that month goes. Because that's the litmus test. Tishrei, it's easy to feel inspired, but the next month, the grind, that's where it gets really interesting. Kislev, of course, is Hanukkah, the month of Hanukkah. We have the Sagittarius, which is the bow, again, the archer, evoking the Jewish warriors of the Maccabees. But the key to archery is not when you shoot, it's before you shoot. It's not shaking. The key to getting your target is being able to relax. before firing. You with me on this? It's about the relaxation before we spring into action. That's the key to action, is relaxation. So the attribute to correct in Kislev is relaxation. Binyamin, Samach. Samach means resting, which is again related to relaxation. Binyamin, Benjamin, what's the connection? All right, I'm forgetting already. Shoin vergessen. All right, we'll move quickly and then we'll take questions, but we'll close this out. Tevet is the month of the winter, which is the winter month is also Asara B'Tevet, when Jerusalem was initially sieged. It's related to anger, the tribe of Dan, and Ayin, and Capricorn. So it's about redirecting anger, not towards someone else, but toward the things that need to be changed. Ayin is like eyes. We have two eyes to give us a little bit of perspective, so we can see what's important and what's not so important. If we had only one eye, right, then we wouldn't have any depth. The fact that we have two eyes gives us depth to perceive what things we should really get worked up about, what things we shouldn't. Capricorn is like the goat, which is stubborn, the idea of being stubborn in a good way and taking action against those things that need to take action, but not against the things that don't. Shvat is, of course, Tu B'Shvat, which is the festival of the New Year's of trees and things that grow. Related to Aquarius, the pitcher, watering, things don't grow without water. It's healthy. It's the attribute to correct is eating. It's about food, healthy eating. Asher is the tribe that had abundant growth in their portion in Israel. It's related to Tzaddik. Tzaddik, it says Ochel l'sov nefesh, that Tzaddik eats to satisfy his or her soul, but not for the body. It's about eating for a higher purpose and not for a lower base purpose. Again, channeling our physical desire for eating toward a higher power, toward a higher place. Finally, Adar is the month of Purim. Pisces, fish live underwater. So too Purim is about things that are hidden. We wear masks. It's about concealment. Kuf is a monkey, right? What's kuf? The letter kuf, but kuf also means monkey, which means on Passover, on Purim, we ape, right? We pretend to be something that we're not. The idea is that underneath things, there's tremendous truth that's underneath the surface, related to Naphtali and laughter. Laughter being the source of laughter comes when there is the unexpected, which is all what Purim is all about. Purim is all about the unexpected, that which you didn't see under the surface coming out, and that is the energy of Adar. So this is a very quick overview, way quicker than I intended, but a quick overview of the 12 tribes connected with the signs, the Hebrew letters, the tribe, and the attribute to correct. And I know I didn't hit all of them along the journey, especially at the end, due to the speed in my brain, kind of picking up 75 to 80% of the information in my recall. But the point is like this, that Kabbalistic astrology is not about predicting the future, but a call to action. And that's a very different thing. When it comes to predicting the future, then it's saying, oh, I don't need God because I already have my future. That's a sin. But to tell me what I need to work on, avodah, that's never a sin. The focus on avodah, focus on work, that's not a sin. And in fact, we have this compelling map, as Kabbalah teaches us in Sefer Yetzirah. All right. Thank you for listening and being part of this. Next week, we'll pick it up inside. We'll look back at Greece and what their astrological sign was, and we'll get back to our text-based study.
Going back to you on that, it's a lot of quicksand, so let's start with the
Yeah.
The word that itself doesn't mean to sin,
But it could be related. Okay, got it.
The sinking sands.
Got it. And of course, the big joke about quicksand is that as kids, we always thought that quicksand was one of the greatest fears, right? Because all the cartoons, people were sinking all the time.
Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't, yeah, there's much bigger problems than quicksand. Turns out quicksand was not in the top 10. Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yes. So they're usually not counted. Yeah. They are booted because they are, see you. Thank you, Anthony. They are booted because they are, they're just in a different league. The tribe of Levi, they were the priests and they were the spiritual heads. So this is kind of like for the rest of the tribes, as it were. whereas the Levite tribe, which comprised both Kohanim and Leviim, so they were, are you a Kohen or Levi? You're not.
That's why you asked.
No, I thought maybe, I just couldn't recall in my memory if you were. Is anybody here a Kohen or Levi? You're Bas Kohen. Nice.
Did you-
Oh, right, yeah.
Judith was-
Okay, maybe that, okay. Yeah, you would know it, you would have to find out if it's in the family. If it's based on patrilineal descent, so it's your father would know, or his father would have known, and yeah. You're not gonna know the tribe, it's just
If you
a,
look on a gravestone, and the gravestone, it'll usually say Cohen or like.
Or they have them.
yeah,
Yeah.
or have the
If
hands.
you can find, you don't know, you can find gravestone pictures or something, the internet, it's easy to find.
Or marriage documents, ketubah, we'll have that on there.
The Hebrew name would always say Cohen.
right.
You are extremely known.
Oh, I was gonna say, if I can only speak from my experience, my grandfather was a Kohen. And you would know that within the first few minutes of my grandfather, bless his memory, you would know that within the first few minutes of meeting him. Because he would absolutely tell you. He would be offering a priestly blessing to you. He's all over that. No, I mean he was, right. Right. No, you're right.
What have
Right.
you brought?
Huh?
Have you brought a lamb or a bullock?
My grandfather was ready to work in the third temple. He was like always like, all right. Like he was a shochet, so he was always, ready to go for that. My mom's dad. Yeah, he very special. Yeah. Many of you guys have seen him around the Zoom and used to visit here. Very, he passed away a year and a half ago. Oh, almost 2 years ago, actually. 98 years old. 98. And I know.
He was the same thing, think he's not on there, and this piece.
Let me think. That's a very good question. Was Levi on the ephod? Oof, that's a really good question. I need to look it up. Well, yeah, but the question is, oh, you have one with the names? Really?
It's either Joseph and or the two sons
Of Joseph. Because at the end of Jacob's life, he blesses Menashe and Ephraim. He says, you should be like Ephraim and Reuben and Shimon, which means that they'll have a place amongst the 12 tribes. When Levi's not counted, Levi's not always not counted, but when Levi's not counted, they get to 12, we're going to divide it by Menashe and Ephraim. They're going to take up two of the slots. For this, I actually never thought of why Levi is not included in this. My guess is what I said, but I don't know that definitively. My guess is because they're a little bit higher than everyone else's, what everyone else needs to work on, because they're like
They didn't have land issues because they had property.
Right.
And they didn't have work issues.
they were meant to live the
They weren't living
mundane.
a mundane life.
Exactly.
They didn't have a lot of problems with actions and things like that versus.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I guess. That's what my guess would be. That's a good question. But all of this is based on Sefer Yetzirah that I just organized into a chart. Actually, my wife made this chart years ago. She laid it out, and it's no ephod, but it's
So your wife lays up a lot?
absolutely or the astrological charts. Anyway, it's fascinating. If anybody wants a bit more, I'm happy to after. Just let me know afterwards that there's some resources I can share with you. It's fascinating. But I think the core distinction that I want to emphasize again as we close out is this is not about a passive acceptance of destiny. It's like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Kabbalah and astrology is, okay, this is an energy that you might be associated with. Now go work with that. Now go work on that. This is not like sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is a call to action, which is, I think, kind of the opposite of what astrology may be used for otherwise. All right, so that's a little bit about it. Yeah,
Question.
sure.
Very potential question. Does the letter subject have anything to do with the word?
Yes. Well, the original letter's name is Tzadi, but we always call it Tzadik. But I've seen it connected. So in this case, Tzadik for Shvat is that, like I said, is Tzadik ochel l'sov nafsho. Tzadik eats to satisfy the soul, not for the body. So there's tzaddik eating doesn't mean it's any person in particular. A higher way to eat is where it's not about the body, but it's about the energy, it's about the soul. And that's the correct, how to correct eating means that it's not about, I always use the example of like filling up the, I'm sure you've heard this before, like filling up the car. No one ever takes a selfie like, oh, using the 95 or whatever it is. What's the different octanes? 93?
87.
93. I've never seen anybody post on Instagram with like, 93 selfie. But you know where you do see a selfie? Restaurants. And what's the difference? Fuel. It's the same thing. We make a big deal about human fuel, but with car fuel, automobile fuel, we're like, oh no, the fuel is utilitarian. It's to get us to the next place. But with human fuel, ideally, it's the same thing.
We don't make, my whole thing is food. Not that you can see, we don't make it. We actually treat our cars better than we treat ourselves. We will not put the wrong.
Oh, I agree with that also. Yes. Yes, correct. I agree with that as well. Yes.
So
It's a dual-edged sword. On the one hand, yes, I agree with everything that you're saying. Huh? Oh, nice. See that? You see that? Look at that. Boom.
Wait, April,
You see that? He's an Aquarius. Look at that. An Aquarius and he's,
Baby is on the,
no, he's saying picture. He's saying picture. What were we saying? What were we saying?
baby is on the,
Levi is on the AFO. Okay.
on the April.
Arlene.
Priest were the 12.
Levi is,
Yeah, if
Levi
is
gets a
on
stone.
that,
so Menashe and Ephraim are not there.
Lady and Joseph.
So Yosef, but not Menashe and Ephraim. Exactly. Right, because you don't have Yosef, you have just his kids. Yeah. Here.
Sometimes Joseph is a tribe, sometimes he's not.
No, Yosef is, well, sometimes Yosef is one tribe, and then Levi would be, and that would,
Right.
but when Levi is not mentioned, you don't have Yosef, you have his two kids, Ephraim and Menashe, and each of them is a tribe. So sometimes you have the original, the OG, and sometimes you have the two, depending on, you never have 13 tribes. The 12, though, there's two configurations of the 12, essentially.
So there's synagogues in Israel with astrological charts on in the mosaics on the.
I don't know.
There are.
Oh, there are. Oh, you're saying there are? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, they're early synagogues, and the earlier you go, the more that astrology was a massive part of Judaism. But is it currently, it has its place currently?
I don't know anybody that's practicing. I'm just sharing with you what it says in the Sefer Yetzirah is the oldest book of Kabbalah. What I'm pulling out here is the oldest work. Some say Abraham wrote it. Abraham wrote Sefer. Some say so. This is like ancient Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Is anyone practicing this today? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. I don't know. Who might?
You can look at this different. You can say, okay, I can look at this and see I have to focus on one thing. It's also down there, all of these are things that everybody has to worry about.
Yes.
So every month you want to.
Yes.
It's like a plan, action. plan.
Every month, it's an action plan. All right. So
All these-
right,
I
so-
need more help than one or the other.
exactly. So this month of Nisan, everyone at a Seder has an opportunity to create a dialogue. I mean, what greater challenge is there? Intergenerational dialogue. There's no greater challenge. And we have a holiday that's all about getting the kids to ask questions to the parents and the parents to communicate to the children in a way that's mutually responsive. That's huge. That's a very hard thing to work on. It's a very important thing to work on.
Bring a
That's this
talking
month.
stick that I made. They call it the talking stick. For the Seder. And whoever is holding the talking stick.
That's the talk?
That, yeah, and everybody else is silent.
Interesting.
And if you want to.
That
respond,
helps.
You have to raise your hand if you want to respond. The talking stick can come to you after it goes through the entire circle. And we do that when I go to sweat lodge, we get talking sticks, and they call it, but mine is talking stick.
No.
Nice.
And I'm not going to New Orleans because she says, no talking stick, no deep philosophical discussion. The 3-year-old told the story of Passover last year, and that was about it. I'm like, I'll be in Atlanta. Thank you very much.
Everyone does it their own way. Anyway,
That's every year.
good. All right. So just by way of calendar scheduling. So next week we will have class, but then it'll be Passover for the next week will be Passover. And then the week after will be a few days after Passover. So I'm not sure if we're going to do the following Sunday also, but stay tuned. I'll send that an email. All right, good. Great to see you. Great to see you guys.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh,
Beautiful
of course you're gonna,
class.
of course you're gonna get a hug. Bring it in.
Wonderful to see you.
I love you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, all the best to the family. And I see your evening classes on Wednesday coming.
Yeah. We're doing Wednesday on Supernatural.
Yeah. These things are of interest to me.
Yeah, so that's gonna be a fun class.
The last one I would miss because I'm away, but.
We record it. Yeah, we record. I'll send you the recording.
Thank
For
you so
sure.
much.
Great to see you.
So much.
See you guys. Bye, Dr. David. Bye, Joy. Bye, Ellen. We'll see you guys. Shavua Tov.